Welcome back to Dragon Ball Dissection's look at the Majin Buu arc, where I find myself pondering. In the last arc, the titular villain did not show up until Part 8. I wonder how long it will take for Buu to show up, because the story is certainly not introducing anything similar to him right now. To put a more positive spin on some of the things I talked about last time, that is one of the fascinating things about the spontaneous writing style employed by Toriyama in Dragon Ball. All of these arc names I and anyone else bestow are retroactive, created after being able to see the full story. Toriyama didn't introduce Trunks thinking he'd be a part of the Cell arc. Likewise, he didn't put Gohan in high school in service to any kind of Majin Buu arc. But due to the way the stories evolved, that's what they became linked into. It may not always yield the most cohesive results, but there is a charm to it. Anyway, Gohan returns home to let his family know that Goku will be coming back to life for a day. Naturally, they are thrilled. They are so thrilled that Chi-Chi has no problem letting Gohan drop out of school to train for the tournament. She's been raising 2 kids by herself after all, and apparently they've always just lived off of her father's money. Since I'm assuming all his riches came from conquering, killing, and plundering, which he doesn't do anymore, that's not exactly a bottomless well. Between that and teaching martial arts to Gohan's brother, the Buu arc seems to paint a picture of a Chi-Chi who has mellowed out to an extent. That brings us to Son Goten. Gohan's little brother has appeared in all of one scene up to this point, which was so trivial I didn't even bother to mention it in Part 1. It's at this point we finally get to know him, and the first thing you'll notice is that he is a blatant Goku clone, minus the tail. It's funny that Gohan was once called a mini Goku for resembling his father, but nowadays, his appearance is treated as the odd one out given that his father, grandfather, and brother are almost completely identical to each other. But aside from matching looks, albeit in line with Toriyama's 90s art style, Goten also possesses a personality much more similar to Goku's than Gohan's is. He's playful, curious, and not terribly cunning. It's not an exact copy, there's just enough about him to make him feel like a distinct character. Even his uniform is its own unique take on the classic Kame-style dogi. But he does feel like a younger Goku were he brought up in a more upper-middle-class environment. It's clear he's intended to be a major pillar in this next-generation groundwork being laid. However, the character comes across as Toriyama hedging his bets, playing it safe. Goku is no longer part of the story, but adding in a carbon copy of him can function as the next best thing. However, since Goku is reintroduced into the story in between Goten's first and second appearances, Goten comes across in the following chapters as something of a lame duck. He's already been rendered redundant and we barely even met him. I guess you could make the argument he's in danger of being doubly redundant. We learned that in the alternate future, Gohan served as something of a big brother figure to Trunks. 8-year-old Trunks' introduction implied a similar connection between him and our Gohan. Unfortunately, that relationship isn't explored further. Gohan and Trunks barely interact beyond this. I guess depending on your perspective, Goten either picks up the ball that Trunks drops, or serves as an annoying interloper denying us Gohan and Trunks bonding time. I don't really feel that strongly either way. I have nothing against Goten. In fact, for the scenes coming up with Videl, Goten's charming lack of guile in acclimating her into their world works a lot better than it would have with the savvier Trunks. And there's no denying that his scenes with Gohan are incredibly fun. As I said in Part 1, Gohan grew up without any peers. He was always the kid character. Why Gohan's lack of a role in the Cell arc can be somewhat forgiven is that he was a kid surrounded by adults, so it made sense that those adults would be protective towards him. Giving Gohan a younger brother and someone he can train allows us to finally see him as an active leader, rather than being led around by everyone else. For once, Gohan is the most knowledgeable one in the room. Well, he doesn't know everything. He's all too quick to dismiss his little brother's powers beneath his notice until a training exercise almost puts a rock through his head. And then, of course, when Goten asks his big brother if he can become a Super Saiyan, Gohan mistakenly assumes he's inquiring into the possibility as opposed to asking for permission. Because he can totally already do that. Goten can become a Super Saiyan without the slightest bit of struggle. We see a bit later that Trunks can too. Many fans are angered by this Super Saiyan bargain sale, as Vegeta calls it, believing it cheapens this once legendary status. Given how out of step I continually seem to be with the majority of the Dragon Ball fandom, it shouldn't surprise you that I find it absolutely hilarious. Yes, it does cheapen Super Saiyan. I don't really care though. I might have a lot of problems with the Buu arc, but Toriyama's increasing need to take the mickey out of Dragon Ball's established tropes is not one of them. In fact, it's part of what makes this storyline so charming. And even then, I'm sticking a big old asterisk on the end of that statement. This cheapens Super Saiyan, but only in the sense that all forward development devalues what comes before it. For Vegeta and Gohan, it wounds their pride because they had to work so hard. That's the joke. But Dragon Ball has always been about progress. Flying was once seen as a fairly unique trick. Now Gohan is confused that Goten can become a Super Saiyan, but doesn't know a skill as basic as flying. That doesn't diminish the earlier instances where a well-placed revelation of Buku Jutsu has saved someone's butt. Likewise, Goten and Trunks possessing an innate ability to transform doesn't diminish the narrative that led to Goku's ability to do so. In Avatar: The Last Airbender, Toph revolutionizes earthbending by seeing metal for the refined earth it is and learning to manipulate it. That its sequel series, The Legend of Korra, includes an entire police force that can perform the same skill as a routine matter doesn't minimize Toph's accomplishment. Somebody had to be the first. The true pioneers always have the most difficulty. That's why it's easier for us to get to California now than when the 49ers were doing it. There's certainly a practical reason for giving Trunks and Goten this ability. There's really no other way these two characters could hope to measure up alongside the established characters in serious combat if they didn't have this skill. And obviously that's a problem in its own right, but at least it's being addressed in a way that's entertaining. I don't think it's difficult to believe that their father's ability to do so was passed down to them. And from a writing perspective, there are only so many ways to show a character enduring trauma to reach Super Saiyan before it feels repetitive and loses its impact. In fact, we've only had two: Goku in the Frieza arc and Gohan in the Cell arc. Vegeta and Trunks are given shocking, dramatic reveals instead, but their initial transformations are never shown. Gohan's first form Super Saiyan is likewise glossed over. And now, Goten and Trunks are given surprise reveals but played for comedy instead of drama. You have to mix these things up or else it gets boring. I find this approach suitably quick and memorable. We'll return to this later because I do sincerely believe the narrative gets a lot of mileage out of this concept. The ease of their powers truly defines their characters and ties back into some of the earliest and most important themes of Dragon Ball. What I can complain about, though, is this. Last time, several commenters stated that Gohan should have simply been able to seek out Tenshinhan through his ki. I can accept that it might be difficult if he doesn't know the general direction, and if Tenshinhan isn't expending a large amount. Honestly, I've never really cared for the idea of every character being able to instantly sense strong ki no matter where on the planet they are. It's always come across to me as extremely limiting from a storytelling perspective, not to mention seeming like a huge invasion of privacy. Anytime a major threat attacks, everybody's going to immediately know. When Gohan transformed into a Super Saiyan to take out bank robbers, were we not seeing the rest of the cast freak out, wondering what was happening to force him to do that? So I'm happy to accept some limits on that. But Goten states that Chi-Chi is aware that he can become a Super Saiyan since she's the one who trained him while Gohan was studying. What I can't accept is Gohan not noticing a brand new Super Saiyan transformation when it occurs right outside his own flippin' window! The brothers' training is interrupted by the arrival of Videl. She apparently had to find his address in the school records. So on one hand, there's more stalking going on. But on the other, are we supposed to assume that Gohan was trying to ditch her? He seems continually unhappy that she's there. And look, I don't think Videl blackmailing Gohan into this tournament paints her as completely ethical, and in light of that I'm honestly not sure what motivates Gohan to sing her praises to Bluma earlier. But she is the whole reason he's in this tournament, and training her to fly was one of her demands, so I don't really see what he has to gain by trying to renege on that. I don't know. Even the fact that Gohan is putting so much effort into getting ready for this tournament belies the dual nature of his character. I'm sure he is greatly motivated by the return of his father and doesn't want to look pathetic in front of him, and now that he's talked to his mother, he has two sets of parental expectations on him to do well. But strictly speaking, since, by his own admission, he's not into the whole tournament experience and is afraid of exposing his true power, he could just as easily throw his own matches and not have to worry about any of it. He may not be his father, but I think he enjoys fighting more than he cares to admit. Perhaps it was a bit premature of me to say that Chi-Chi had mellowed out over the past 7 years. She's still definitely Chi-Chi, but she has refocused her overprotectiveness into other areas. For instance, she is very suspicious of Videl's arrival at their house and assumes she's there to ask Gohan on a date. And it's at this point that Chi-Chi has become my mother. What turns her around is the revelation that Videl is very wealthy. So rather than protecting her son from women who aren't her, Chi-Chi is now asking when they're gonna get married, resulting in the best spit take in all of Dragon Ball. But since this is Toriyama romance, that's pretty much all the investment the story needs to ensure that they will indeed get married. Actually, as far as Dragon Ball romances go, this one has a bit more build-up than most of them. In fact, as far as the narrative properly setting it up, this one is second only to Bluma and Yamcha. Again, it's not exactly a high bar to set. A lot of the character stuff is going to wait, though, until the fundamentals of Ki are explained. And this is really the first time any of that has been explored since Goku and Mr. Popo, unless you want to count the very brief Saibai-Man conversation Gohan had with Piccolo. The problem is, Gohan assumes she already has an understanding of Ki and simply needs to learn how to apply it to flying, similar to Goten. When she doesn't understand, Gohan then assumes she has another name for it. After Goten deigns to demonstrate, Videl explains she does have a word for it. A trick. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. So she'll have to be built up from the basics. Unfortunately, there's not much shown of this. The one panel portraying Videl first accessing her Ki is zoomed out so far you can't even see anything. It's such a weird discretionary shot that it'd make more sense if they were experimenting accessing other things instead. And then she's able to float. But the real payoff is seeing Goten literally fly circles around her after the end of the first day. After Videl announces she will be returning the following days until she can match Goten, Gohan advises her to cut her hair short because, as he says, long hair is a liability in tournaments. And somewhere, although he doesn't understand why, Yamcha is crying. Poor dolt. But the real oddity of this conversation is Videl herself, who gets all gooey over the thought that Gohan might be expressing his attraction for girls with short hair. What? These two have so far done nothing to bond. That's in the next chapter, which is handled really well, and it's after that chapter such a scene really should have been placed. All Videl has expressed towards Gohan so far is impatience and manipulation. There's no sense that any of that is simply a cover to hide her true feelings. At best, he's competition for her. At worst, he simply has something she wants. And no, I'm not talking about his body. She wants to learn what he knows. I have to go now. My planet needs me. Since the story is already going to pair these characters alone together for an extended time, might as well give it a tiny chance to build to this moment, rather than vomit it all out on training day 1. And maybe it's just me, but if I was a teenager and had a secret crush on someone, I'd be the least receptive to advances right after my crush's mom had just tried to marry us off. I'd be too embarrassed to admit to anything. But you know, again, Toriyama romance. Their impending marriage being spoken aloud is as good as a binding incantation as far as Dragon Ball is concerned. That's not the problem, not really. What annoys me is that while it's definitely not what Gohan is saying, in the context Videl is interpreting this statement, Gohan is basically expressing his desire for her on the condition she change her physical appearance for him. This is a boy she's known for less than 3 days. And rather than that setting off any red flags, she's all over it. I'd expect this from Chi-Chi, at least it's in character. And let me go ahead and say this, Videl is a character I really like. She's certainly not a perfect person and has picked up quite a bit of negative character traits from her father, while balancing them with a fair amount of healthy ambition and genuine altruism. And her imperfections are largely relatable. Stalking is not good, but you can understand why she'd be suspicious of this strange guy who commutes from 1,000 kilometers away, who can jump 8 meters in the air, tank a high-speed baseball to the head, and who she suspects might be connected to those golden-haired guys present at the earth-shattering event that would have defined her life. And as an independent, strong-willed, and maybe slightly arrogant do-gooder, it's understandable why she'd be embittered, jealous, and intimidated by Great Saiyaman, to the point she'd feel the need to gain an edge over him in order to exert a small amount of control. Again, that's not me justifying that behavior, but it is a relatable feeling. What's not understandable is reducing all of that to an insulting, "I just want senpai to notice me." It's a terribly uncomfortable stereotype to say that the toughest nails, emotionally guarded girl secretly wants nothing more than for a man to tell her how she should be wearing her hair to please him. And I'm clearly viewing this through a 21st century lens, and I'll cut it some slack for that, but I'm not going to ignore it completely. I'm not saying that Videl shouldn't be allowed to appear vulnerable and smitten, and I love that her revealing that should come about due to a misunderstanding. It's the perfect reversal, just as Gohan had accidentally exposed his true self to her. but it bothers me that it happens as a reaction to the equivalent of being told, "You'd be prettier if you smiled more." As for the eternal nerd debate about what hairstyle is cuter, it should be obvious from my DBZ Season 3 video that I'm a big fan of pigtails. As such, I personally prefer the pigtail look, but the short hair looks really good too. At around the same time, we catch a glimpse of Goku's training in the afterlife. What happens isn't really that important, but it is interesting to note that this scene and the earlier one with Goku shows us more of the other world than we've ever seen before. I'm not really sure where we're supposed to be exactly, but a hint could be provided with the introduction of the Southern Kaio. As recently as the end of the Cell arc, Kaio was still referring to himself as the most important person in the universe, but remember that by the end of the Frieza arc it was already established he was only the Kaio over the Northern Galaxy. This guy is the Kaio over the Southern Galaxy. He's the only other one we ever meet. But it's interesting because this chapter hit the streets less than a month before the TV adaptation began airing a mini-arc in between the Cell arc and this one that takes place in the afterlife. It introduces the Southern Kaio chronologically earlier than he is here, as well as all the other counterparts within that hierarchy. And we know that Toriyama designed at least one of those characters. It stands to reason this cameo was a bit of cross-promotion. The final chapter we're covering today, chapter 429, is all around very cute. It has distilled cuteness and squeezed it into 15 pages. We get Vegeta's Super Saiyan bargain sale scene, which I love. Although just like with Gohan, I wonder how Vegeta's son could have become a Super Saiyan under his nose without him noticing. But for the first time we're really getting to see Vegeta as a person, the person he is now. Unlike the guy who ignored the danger his infant son was in, here he's training him and coaxing him and offering to take him to the amusement park, all while still managing to retain everything that makes him Vegeta. Quite frankly, given what's to come, Vegeta needs all the humanizing he can get. And this really hits the spot. On the other field of training, Gohan and Videl are finally beginning to act like friends around each other. Despite that, Gohan still seems to want to get her the heck out of his life, as he tells Goten to stop inadvertently setting himself as the goal she needs to aspire towards. Taking a break, the two begin chatting about their unconventional family lives. She chafes under her papa's overprotectiveness, including the completely unfair standard that she's not allowed to date a boy unless that boy is stronger than him. And she's dropping a pretty heavy signal right there, but it gets a bit overshadowed when she says that Gohan is good, but not nearly as strong as her father. Gohan uses this opening to inquire whether she'd be upset if her dad would, lose. While she doesn't think it's possible, she does think it'd be beneficial to knock him down a peg. Gohan is excited to hear that because, despite how disinterested he seems in her, he was afraid of upsetting her by being stronger than her dad. I know he wants her to leave so he can train all out, but he's the one who's going to insist no one use Super Saiyan in the tournament. Everything else is pretty much out of the bag at this point, and he just found out she wouldn't care if he was stronger than her father. Ah well, he's a teenager. I guess he doesn't have to make complete sense. That leads into talk of Gohan's father, who Goten lets slip is both dead and returning for the tournament. And for some reason, rather than confusing Videl, she comes to the bizarrely specific conclusion that he must have run out on them years ago and secretly told only the kids he was coming back for this tournament. For anyone wondering whatever happened to Videl's mom, keep in mind that this is the kind of behavior Videl seems to think is expected from fathers. Oh geez, maybe this does explain her unhealthy relationship to men. At any rate, despite her obvious attraction towards Gohan, she does not find some excuse to continue training with him after she's learned to fly. Instead, she leaves after 10 days to train on her own. This makes Gohan so happy that he actually becomes the narrator for some reason. Go figure. Next time on Dragon Ball Dissection, the tournament begins! No, not the Tenkaichi Budokai, but the Tenkaichi Dai Budokai, in the second Dragon Ball Z movie of 1993, The Galaxy at the Brink, the super incredible guy. I swear I don't do this intentionally to fake you guys out. This is just when the movie premiered. But faking you out is a nice bonus. So thank you as always for watching. If you're new, Dragon Ball Dissection is an ongoing series with over 100 episodes you can check out. I did a Let's Play on Super Mario RPG. That's fun too. And thanks so much to my patrons. You guys are truly keeping the channel afloat. I'll see you next time.